From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, Animal Communications. Great program for you tonight. Here's what's happening. More than 1,000 flights have already been canceled today in the United States as winter weather moves through the middle of the country. Most of the cancellations so far are affecting the Dallas Love Field and Dallas-Fort Worth International Airports in Texas. Russia is amassing another 200,000 soldiers for a massive new assault on Ukraine. The NATO Secretary General grimly said this is a sign that Vladimir Putin is not prepared for peace. A suicide bomber blew himself up inside a crowded mosque in a highly fortified security compound in Pakistan, killing 59 people, including 27 police officials. This is the latest in a string of attacks targeting police there. Cindy Williams, who played Shirley opposite Penny Marshall's Laverne on the popular sitcom Laverne and Shirley, has died. She was 75 years old after a brief illness. Hockey Hall of Famer Bobby Hall, a 12-time All-Star and 2-time Hart Trophy winner, has also passed on. He was 84. I know his son, Brett, who was a St. Louis Blues star. Our condolences to the family. San Francisco is trying to slow the expansion of robo-taxis after repeated incidents in which cars without drivers stopped and idled right in the middle of the street for no obvious reason, delaying bus rides and disrupting the work of firefighters. Lauren Weinstein, our expert on technology, with us. I've never been a fan of driverless vehicles, and this takes the cake, Lauren.
Yeah, well, I mean, first we need to be clear about what we mean when we say driverless vehicles or self-driving vehicles. I mean, for the purposes of this discussion, we're not talking about driver assist features in cars like Tesla or other brands. We're talking about cars that can drive end-to-end routes with a passenger sitting in the back seat and either nobody in the driver's seat or in some cases a safety driver who doesn't touch the wheel or other controls unless something goes wrong. So for true self-driving cars right now, I consider Alphabet's Waymo to be in the lead and Cruise also doing well. Waymo actually has been running a completely driverless, no safety driver commercial taxi service in Phoenix, notably where there are nice wide roads and good weather most of the time and relatively few pedestrians. In San Francisco, Waymo is using safety drivers and Cruise isn't at this point. Now, you may recall that years ago we were told by proponents that by now there would likely be millions of true self-driving cars on the road owned by ordinary people who could even make money sending them out unattended as robo-taxis. And, of course, that hasn't happened. And it may never happen in our lifetimes or longer. There are a bunch of issues to making these things work. They have to be really well maintained. The equipment needed for full autonomy is still extensive and expensive. And what's been found, as many of us predicted, is that there are so many situations that are hard to predict and difficult or impossible for these cars to deal with by themselves without human intervention, plus the added complications of snow and other bad weather. So these robo-taxi services have extensive real-time support staffs who can communicate with the passenger and even take over control of the vehicles remotely. So this turns into a quite complicated and again, very expensive undertaking. Now, in the San Francisco case, especially with the Cruise vehicles, the robo-taxis indeed sometimes just stop for no reason and block traffic, which is a potential disaster for emergency vehicles. In fact, there was a case already where firefighters reportedly had to break into a Cruise robo-taxi to keep it from running over their fire hoses during an active fire event. So the bottom line now isn't that this tech is bad or shouldn't continue to develop and be tested and used, but that states and the federal government have seemingly been really reluctant to regulate this technology for fear of stunting its growth. But now it's time for that to change. Now that the public is increasingly involved with these vehicles, they should not keep getting essentially a free ride without rigorous safety regulations. No pun intended, of course.
Exactly. Would you get into one of these driverless cars?
The Phoenix taxi service that Waymo runs there is very impressive. I've seen, if you go to YouTube, you can watch videos. There's one guy in particular who recorded a lot of his trips on those. In a situation where there was really good weather and where I trusted the company on a short route, in all the best situations, I think it would be interesting to try. I would be very reluctant to do it in a situation where there was, a lot of traffic in a city center, in bad weather, in a strange place. I could live without that, I think, literally.
Thanks, Lauren. I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. About a year ago, the used car business was rollicking party time. The coronavirus pandemic and a global semiconductor shortage forced automakers to stop or slow production of new cars and trucks, pushing consumers to used car lots where prices for pre-owned vehicles surged. Now the used car business is suffering a brutal hangover. Americans, especially people on tight budgets, are buying fewer cars as interest rates rise and fears of a recession grow, and improved auto production has eased the shortage of new vehicles. A recent study showed that many Americans are more open to God and desire spiritual growth in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. A report released by the faith-based research organization Barna Group found that 44% of adults in the U.S. are more open to God because of the pandemic than they were before. Dr. Sky, Stephen Cates with us. And, Stephen, before you get rolling with your report, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you, George. I appreciate that. I've made 67 orbits around the sun. And what does that translate into? 24,271 days. And, well, we simply pray for more. So thank you for that.
You're in retrograde.
I love that. Well, George, we begin with new insights into dark energy. What is the mysterious force in the cosmos? What is it? Well, it's energy inherent to the fabric of space-time itself. And as the universe expands, it's the energy density, that is, energy per unit of volume, that remains constant rather than drop. But in simplistic terms, think of it this way. Dark energy is the driving force, the acceleration expansion of the universe. But even more simplistic, think of it as the evil counterpart to gravity. That's what physicists and astrophysicists tell us, providing a negative pressure which fills the universe and stretches the fabric of space-time itself. How about this? It accounts for 68 to 72% of the universe's energy and matter. But what drives it, George, nobody knows. But the other mysterious component of the universe is something we call dark matter, which is thought to make up over 80% of all matter in the universe, which no one has seen. What could it be? We know visible matter is called baryonic matter. It's protons, neutrons, and electrons. But dark matter is thought by many scientists to probably be, because it's non-baryonic matter, maybe neutrinos. But we know dark matter exists because of gravity. But what's the proof? Proof exists as material in the center of galaxies, George, should be moving faster than the outer edges. But both locations had the same rotation velocity, simply indicating galaxies had more mass than could be seen. The answer to these mysteries continues. We shift to space. China has been cultivating interest to have astronauts from the European Space Agency join them on the Tiangong space station. But the ESA is very cool to the idea, George, as they claim they did not have the budgetary capacity or the political interest or intentions at this time to send astronauts to the Tiangong space station. A backstory, Tiangong was launched back in 2021 and is now a large functioning space station. This Tiangong space station makes many bright passes over the listening area, and this week, if you'd like to see them, simply go to heavens-above.com for times. How about this? Asteroid 2023 BU, many know now, passed the Earth on Thursday by an incredible distance. Isn't that amazing, George? 2,000 miles. That's totally unbelievable. 16 to 20 feet in size. It's one of the closest in history. But in the live sky, observers in the southern latitudes of the U.S. right now have got to see the moon eclipse Mars. We call it an occultation. So if listeners out there, viewers, can go out and see the moon right now, that little orangey object right to the right side or the bright side of the moon is the planet Mars. We also talk about comet ZTF. It's getting closer to the pole star. We viewed it here in Phoenix over the weekend, but with the bright moon, it'll be a little difficult to say the least, but try it nonetheless in a few days to come. We always remind everybody to go what? To theskylive.com for more information. Always, emails, we love them, drsskyshow@gmail.com. We always say it and we mean it. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. I'm your navigator on the highway to the heavens. Thank you, George, for the birthday wishes.
Absolutely. Have a great one. Up next, Judge Jim Gray back with us on Coast to Coast as we talk about the future of our planet. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. James Gray, Judge James Gray, back with us, has been a trial judge in Orange County, California since 1983 before becoming a judge. He served as a volunteer in the Peace Corps in Costa Rica, a staff judge advocate and criminal defense attorney in the Navy JAG Corps, a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, a civil litigating attorney in a private law firm, and in addition to being a Republican candidate for U.S. Congress in 1998, was a Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate in 2004. Judge Jim, welcome back to the program.
Mr. Norrie, it's always good to be with good people.
Well, you too. And you do a great job for society. You really do. How did you get involved in the public sector?
Well, George, I've always kind of seen myself as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I learned from my time as an attorney that judges are really able to listen and to really do good things for society. I'm in the responsibility business, of course, as well, and we certainly need that. But, when I was on the bench, I was able to put in programs. I probably started the first drug court in the country back within 6 months of my appointment. We put in a peer court program, which is helping mentoring high school kids from juvenile delinquency. It's so gratifying to be in the public sector. I was on a formal probation violation calendar one time, and I would get reports back from probation for these various people. I'd have a courtroom full of people. And if they gave 3 stars from the probation department, that meant they're kind of treading water, but they're doing okay. 4 stars means they're taking it seriously for themselves, and 5 stars means they're taking it seriously for themselves and also helping their colleagues. And I didn't get many 5 stars, but when I did, my procedure was I'd call them up first in front of everybody, commend them, tell them what had happened, and I'd congratulate them, get off the bench and shake their hands. George, there were 2 times when young men, maybe in their early 20s, broke down in tears when I shook their hands. And they said, Your Honor, no man has ever commended me for anything in my life. Mentoring our people, holding them accountable, of course, but also commending them and giving them optimism really helps. And we're all human beings, George, and as a result directly of being involved with your program before, I've started a correspondence with, it's up to like 40 people that are incarcerated in prisons all around our country. And mostly no one can be defined by the worst thing they've ever done. They're sorry for it. I was younger. I was 20 years ago, whatever. But we treat people as individuals, both for better or worse. And it's just a privilege to be able to sit on the bench and carry out justice, tendered with a little bit of understanding.
Well, it's a privilege to have you on the program. I think this is your 3rd time now, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. And in fact, I've gotten to know you fairly well, George, and you certainly have a lot of listeners. But I also see you as an artist who tries to get honest and interesting information out into our world, even including some people that sometimes tend to be controversial, like your present guest.
Absolutely. What do you think of Judge Judy?
Oh, gosh, she would be sanctioned and pushed off the bench within about an hour and a half if she were to do anything close to what she does there. But obviously, she's not a practicing judge, and she can. It's Hollywood, but it's certainly not realistic. You do not treat people that way.
You've been controversial sometimes. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Jim.
Well, I have been controversial. But I think probably, George, one thing that really sets me apart from most people who've ever really been on this planet is that I realized at an early age that one of the worst things that can happen to a person is to be on your deathbed and think, I wish I would have or I wish I would not have. And I've not let that happen to me. So I've taken advantage of opportunities as they've arisen. I'm proud of that. You can't do everything. But I also felt, gosh, you mentioned some of my background, but as a prosecutor, as a federal prosecutor, as a criminal defense attorney in the Navy, and I'd been on the bench for 9 years, and I just saw that our program nationwide of drug prohibition was not working. And so I did something very unusual, as you know, for a sitting trial court judge. Back in 1992, I held a press conference. Judges don't do that. And told anyone that would listen that, what our nation's drug policy was doing was harming us more than it was helping us, and there had to be a better way. Let's put our heads together and come up with it. And, who better than a pretty conservative judge in a conservative county just never used any form of illicit substances? At least they had to listen to the message. And some of the best people I've ever met in my life, I've met because of my involvement in drug policy reform.
Absolutely. And now you add fentanyl to the mix. It's a disaster.
Oh, it really is. Witness this, and we've discussed this before, and it bears repeating. The United States of America has 5% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners. And there was a U.S. Senator named Jim Webb, I think from Virginia, who was faced with those statistics and said, look, either we're the most criminally oriented people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? And, of course, it's mostly this drug prohibition, which really has become a war on drugs, has become a war on our people, mostly in the lower economic areas because they can't defend themselves so well. And then they use, and I've seen this in juvenile court repeatedly, where juvenile street gangs will use the sale of illicit drugs as a recruiting tool. Hey, man, you want to make some money? We know you'll never make it into the NBA. The best way to make money in your life is to join our gang and sell illicit drugs. And it's true. And it's a real positive thing that they bring these people into their street gangs, and it just causes harm all the way around.
You've cited a great story, Jim, about a woman who was going through a divorce because her husband drank too much. Tell us that story.
Well, that was in my drug court, and I started this. This was alcohol-related offenses, George, and that I found quickly as a trial court judge that we would take these people who are alcoholics, who are prime candidates to be recidivists and really hurt people, and we'd kind of slap them on their wrist and take away some money and shoot them out the door. So I actually started a review program where you would, if you had a blood alcohol of 0.18 or above, and we would put you through a screening. And if you were determined by some professionals to be an alcoholic, alcohol addicted, we would put you on a program. And the program would take you off alcohol. And then have you enroll in the program. 30 days later, you'd have to come back with proof of enrollment, and you'd had a blood test and all these various things, joined AA, and bring a letter from someone in your life that is saying, okay, he's been off alcohol now or she for the last 30 days. What change have you seen? And, George, I'm proud of it. I have a stack of, I don't know, maybe an inch and a half thick, such as, Dear Judge Gray, I was going to divorce my wife. He would get, my husband. He would get drunk. He'd hit me. He'd be irresponsible with our children. But now that you've taken him off alcohol, thank you, you've given me my husband back. I mean, how many letters like that do you need to know that you're on the right track? And it feels just really good to be able to do that. And we would have sometimes the arresting officer would come at the end of the program and embrace the person that he'd arrested, and the arrestee would embrace him too, saying, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. You've shown me the light. You've enforced it. You've gotten me off this drug of choice, and now I'm living a pretty much normal life. It's pretty rewarding.
How do you think the future of the United States seems with younger people? I mean, I know some folks, they call into the program, they really have their act together. But what about the rest of the population, the younger population? Are you confident that they can carry the torch for us?
George, I'll tell you, we have a program that we have taped. It's 17 episodes. It's called Becoming America. America is a perfect idea. The United States of America is a work in progress, and it's based on the federal Constitution. I've written a musical about that, etc. I was interviewing a political science professor from Michigan State University, and I told him, Dr. Allen, I believe the United States is a better country 10 years ago than it was 20 years ago. I think we're a better country today than we were 10 years ago, and I think we'll be a better country 10 years from now than we are today. Do you agree? And he almost choked, George. He said, Judge Gray, I'm so sorry you asked me that question. I believe we're a better country today, but with this culture of victimization, with this irresponsibility that is becoming evident in our society, it's going to be up to our young generation as to whether or not we're a better country 10 years from now, because victimization does not work for the individual. It certainly does not work for the country, but it works really well for politicians who are posturing and they get reelected because it looks like they're doing something positive. They're buying people's votes. So I'm concerned about this rather deeply.
Well, you keep your eyes on it for us, would you?
I promise. I promise. I write about it as much as I can. In fact, our listeners, I've gotten quite a few listeners contact me through my website, which is judgejimgray.com, and it's interactive, and I've written quite a few things. In fact, I've written something we call 2 Paragraphs for Liberty. I've sent it out kind of as a blog. My 400th edition went out today, so it's been 400 Mondays that I've written that out, and they're all on judgejimgray.com. I prove pretty much every time I open my mouth, George, that I don't have all the answers, but it's really important to spur a discussion, and you give and take. And by the way, my father was a true hero of mine, federal judge, and he said something that should be quoted everywhere, which is, you have every right to disagree, but you have no right to be disagreeable. And that's where we're going today. We're so polarized. Anybody says something that, oh my goodness, and then you attack them.
Let's talk more about that, Jim, when we come back in a moment. Judge Jim Gray with us. We'll take calls with him next hour on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to open up the phone lines next hour with Judge Jim Gray, so you get ready to make the call to get on the program. It's the interactive portion of the show. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Judge Jim Gray. His website is his name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Several of his books include Wearing the Robe, Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed, and What We Can Do About It, and also 2030 Kids. Judge, we have lost, and I don't know when it happened, but you're right. We've lost the ability to discuss things with people without other people going ballistic. What happened?
I trace it back to when we got all these cable TV channels, and I thought, wow, that's going to be wonderful. We're all going to get different information, but I was wrong, because now you'll find these different cable TV channels that will find exactly your thoughts, George, and your biases, and will cater everything right to you. And it made us very polarized. We don't have any Walter Cronkites anymore that try to talk to everybody. They just talk to individuals. And do this sometime, where we have an important story, listen to about 5 different broadcasts and different stations, and they'll get the names right, and everything else will be slanted one way or the other. It's a sorry thing, and I think it's resulted in our being so polarized, which is a disaster.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Do you have hope that we're going to pull ourselves out of it?
George, we're resilient. I do, certainly so. We've faced a lot of difficulty in our past, but we need some leadership, and we need people to stand up. And by the way, it's our government, George, and if it's not working, we have no one to blame but ourselves. That's a rather overwhelming task, but it's up to all of us to hold people accountable, to contact our elected officials and say, wait a minute, what about this, and what are you doing about that? You mentioned one of our books, I'm proud to say, that I wrote with my wife, Grace Walker Gray. It's called 2030 Kids. We are the rising heroes of the planet, and it talks about, I think, the most important issue facing our country today, which is that we have too many public schools failing our children, and it's unnecessary, and it certainly doesn't have to happen, but it's a tragedy, and it almost always gravitates into lower economic areas, which regretfully are a lot of African Americans, Hispanics, and that sort of thing. It's not racial, but it's economic. But we've written a novel to try to empower parents to understand that if they could choose where their government money would be spent for the education of their children, they would demand excellence and they would receive it. So if you think about it, George, and this is something that's really leading our country astray, public education is the only area in our economy where the provider dictates what the purchaser will buy, and so they don't have to compete. But if you bring in choice, you bring in empowering parents to choose, now you'll have competition and everybody will get better, except teachers that can't or won't teach, they'll be fired, fortunately, and they'll have to go off and do something different. But losing our children at such an early age for not getting a quality education is a disaster, and we must change that.
I looked at that title for that book, 2030, and it seemed like it was millions of years away. It's only 7 years away from now. My gosh.
That's correct. Yeah, it's amazing. We take a fourth grade student, and 7 or 8 years from now, he's going to be graduating from high school, and he's going to be out there in the world. And what type of person will he or she be? And it's so much better. We have them decide to all be investigators, and so they're going to they're going to decide to make a table? Well, because you have to measure and you have to add up and you have to, all this sort of stuff. So we have them much more active in their school, and it's just exciting, exciting possibility, and it's starting to sweep the country. And Arizona's gone into this now. Lots of places in Florida, Milwaukee, Wisconsin has had it for years. It's something everybody should look into and support.
Are the schools different than when we went to school?
Yes, I think so. I got a very quality education, but we were upper middle class, and I was public schools all the way.
Me too.
I met Milton Friedman one time. Actually, I was running a drug policy for him. He was there, and in intermission, he was talking about school choice. And I said, well, Dr. Friedman, I was a product of public schools. I don't want to harm our public schools. And he said, Jim, let me ask you two questions. Number one, if you're the parent of a high school-age child, what country in the world would you want that child to go to get the best public education that he or she could? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but probably not the United States of America. He said, I think you're right. Second question, if you're the parent of a college-age child, what country in the world would you want that child to go to get the best quality public education that he or she could? And I said, well, I think it would be the United States. He said, I agree with that as well. You know the difference? Parents can choose where their money's going to be spent for college. They cannot choose for high school. He converted me at that moment. It's critically important.
What about private schools?
Well, it could be private school, it could be military school, a vocational school. The parents are in much better position to understand the best place for their child to go and the best type of education. Some are going to be doctors of philosophy and others want to be mechanics. So maybe a vocational school would be best for some, liberal arts school. Let the parents choose and let the money go where those choices are made. They will demand excellence again, and it will be a lot more catered to the needs of that individual child.
Do you think we should make drugs legal?
No, but only in a technical word. I would regulate and control them, basically like wine, as far as some of them, like marijuana. But as far as the other mind-altering drugs, I'd probably put them in the control of medical doctors, the medical profession. So then if you're going, and they could prescribe them, but they would then educate you. George, think about it this way with regard to mind-altering, sometimes addicting substances. The best quality program we have had in the United States in the last 40 years is with cigarettes. We have not made them illegal for adults, but we put education out there, we put actual mores out there, we put restrictions with regard to where you can smoke, and it's worked. We have many, many fewer young people smoking cigarettes than certainly when I was growing up. And so a program of that kind where you rely on education and responsibility is where we should go with these other substances as well. And then you get into a disaster, which is fentanyl. Fentanyl, people do not overdose on fentanyl. George, that's a drug poisoning, and it's caused by drug prohibition because we have no quality control. You don't know what you're putting into your body. You don't know what the substances are. You don't know what the strengths are, and that's why people die. When we had alcohol prohibition, we had the same problem with white lightning, with impurities in the alcohol. People would go blind. We heard that, and people could die. That went away almost overnight when we came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibition. So it's the lack of quality control and, of course, the drug money. I already talked about, juvenile street gangs, but just look at Mexico, George. Look what our drug money has done for life in Mexico, where the cartels now almost outgun the military, the government. They have more money, too, and it's just been a bloody disaster, literally so. It's all caused by our policy of drug prohibition. Shame on us.
Do you have plans to run for political office again?
No, I'm running away from political office at this point, George. I tell people, and you mentioned it, that I ran for Congress as a Republican in 1998. I ran as a Libertarian for U.S. Senate in 2004, and I was the Libertarian nominee for Vice President in 2012. Didn't get close to winning any of those elections, so I tell people with all sincerity that I'm not a politician, and I have the votes to prove it.
I think people are tired of politicians, aren't they?
I am. I don't see any leaders in our country. Forget whatever political views you have. I don't see any leadership where people are standing up and educating, saying this is the reason, this is why we should do such and such. Basically, in fact, I just got something today with a man that's going to run for president as a Libertarian, and he says, in fact, his name is Lars Mapstead, he says, if you think the problems government caused are bad, wait till you see there's proposed solutions. And, government's just off base. It's not the right way to go. It doesn't do things nearly as well as the private sector. George, talk about controversial. I would do away with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Response, and just have private contracts with the Red Cross when we have a disaster. They do a far better job than government does.
They always did.
Yes.
They always did.
Yes, we should.
We have a huge prisoner population listenership, Jim.
Yes, we do.
Huge. And how many of those people should really be in jail?
Some should be in jail. Some should be in prison for a while, but a vast majority could have gone on probation without that. We over-incarcerate, particularly mindlessly long periods of time incarceration. Now, I'm not talking about Charles Manson and Sirhan, that sort of stuff.
Serial killers, murderers, all that.
But there's so many people that, okay, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they're factually innocent. But they had a snitch who was going to testify wrongly that, he confessed to me or whatever, and they're facing 30 years in prison if you go to trial and they believe the snitch, and they're offering you 2 years in prison if you plead guilty. Some people that are factually innocent are literally coerced into pleading guilty. Now, I'm not damning the entire system, George. I think our system is basically pretty good, but it certainly has some holes in it, and certainly I think that the Bureau of Prisons needs to be examined. We need to get some transparency much more into our prisons. We have too many people that died of COVID. We have lack of medical care in prison that is, I think, a disgrace from what I can tell. I have a good friend who's a medical doctor who was in a women's prison and just monitoring it. He said it's just terrible. And these people are in our custody, and they should have a threshold of security, health care, nutrition, exercise. I mean, it's just basic to who we are. In fact, it was Dostoevsky, I think it was, who said that you can tell more about a society by walking into its prisons than you can any other way. And I don't think our society would look very good from what I can tell.
I hear the prison system in Mexico is deplorable.
Oh, do not get arrested in Mexico. By the way, I wouldn't want to go to Turkey. I mean, there are a lot of bad places.
Or Iran.
I understand that. But, you go into Switzerland, you go into Sweden, you go into most of the European countries. They have a far lower number of people in prison for a far lower period of time. And when they are there, they actually address their needs. Like I told you, I address the needs of alcoholics. But, if you have a mental illness, they help you with that. If you don't have a job, they help you get job skills. George, the recidivism rate for people that have a job is plummets. And if you don't have a job, it's increased. You're almost guaranteed to go back into prison. So help people get some job skills while they're in custody. We call them correctional institutes, but they're only correctional in the name only. We don't mostly help people get a degree, learn some job skills, and be able to go out and support yourself, which most people want to be able to do.
What's going on with carjackings and car thefts and stuff? It's at a record pace right now. It's out of control. I've seen videos of people pumping gas at a gas station, and a couple thugs will come by, jump in that car that maybe was foolishly running still or something like that, and take off and steal it. What's happening, Jim?
We are into a lawless thing. We have declared war on police in a lot of ways, defund the police. So the police, and they know if they go out and they get into a little bit of trouble, they're going to get hounded. So they're much more reticent to get out and do it. I was in Oakland about 2 months ago, city of Oakland. I went to Amsterdam University. They were having which is marijuana education related. And while we were there in this wonderful old theater, some people broke into a car. They smashed the rear window. They took a bunch of camera equipment. And so the guy that had the car found out, called 911, didn't get a response. And a friend of mine who was with me, who's a former police officer, saw a police car going by, flagged them down, told them what had happened, and the guys weren't even interested. They weren't even going to go over and look at it or file a report. It's like, goodness sakes, if you get these carjackers know that they're not going to be tracked down, hey, that's an open invitation, and that's where we're going. But at least people have that feeling, which is a disaster for us all. I wrote an editorial op-ed piece with my friend, submitted it to the Oakland newspapers. They weren't even interested. I said, this is what happened. This is why crime is increasing in Oakland and other places, because the police are not doing their job, because they know that sometimes if they make a mistake, they're going to get persecuted. So I would, as a judge...
And the few times they do make mistakes, obviously.
Well, of course they do. Everyone does. But I tell people, I have an opportunity to speak to prosecutors and police officers. I look them square in the face and say, you have an absolute mandate to do the right thing for the right reason every time. Now, we know you're going to make mistakes sometimes, but if you try to do the right thing, we've got your back. Don't worry, we've got your back. But if you do things for political reasons or do things like seemingly happened in Memphis, which I can't even discuss, but if you
those are 10 shows all by themselves.
We're going to investigate and prosecute.
Jim, we're going to come back in a moment and take phone calls with you in your last hour with us here on Coast to Coast. Judge Jim Gray with us. His website, judgejimgray.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. But let's take calls with him next. This hour, we'll take your calls with Judge Jim Gray. You've heard what we've been talking about. Jump aboard and share some thoughts with us and ask him a question or two. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Judge Jim Gray. Jim, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one big problem in this country, what would that be?
It still would be school choice, George. It's just a terrible tragedy not to furnish equal education at all levels of our society. You empower parents to choose where their government money is going to be spent. That problem will start disappearing very quickly.
Yeah, I think so, too. Let's take some calls for you. They're lining up. Let's go to Brendan in Austin, Texas, to get us started. Hey, Brendan.
Thank you guys so much, George and James. It's a great show, and
thank you.
If I sound a little bit more nervous than usual, it's because my heater went out, so I'm shivering.
Oh my gosh, what's it down to out there?
Oh, it's freezing outside. It just got down to 32, but they're putting salt on the road, so we got people out there keeping us going out there.
Wrap those pipes, keep those pipes warm.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's not much you can do about that. We'll just see what we can do, but so. For anybody interested out there, I loved your comments about prohibition. Anybody interested on knowing what's really going on, look out lobbying. Both the parties are owned by corporations. We need to end Citizens United to get profits out of politics. They don't really care about what's going on. So I just wanted to note some positives that a lot of people are feeling beat down by today's world, and they're feeling hopeless and worthless and powerless and living paycheck to paycheck. But a lot of young people get the title of being lazy, but it's not true. Ian Punnett had pointed this out really well, that statistically younger people are working more hours for less value. Our money is worth less. So working more for less than any other generation. And we can see the technology around us. We were raised with this technology. So we can see the lunacy of menial labor and that we have technology to solve the problems around us. And we didn't get to these situations just from one generation. We had a lot of generations that got us to this point. So we're going to have a lot of generations to get us out of this point. And hopefully humankind doesn't have some sort of capitalistic suicide. That would be really unfortunate. But we have a whole generation of minds that are drooling to solve today's problems, and all we need is permission from these centenarians. Like, we have people in power that are so old, they only have 5 years left to live, and they're selling out the future of their grandchildren for short-term profits. We have the solutions today, we just don't have the permission to do it. But yeah, that's pretty much my point. And don't give up hope, people. We have a lot of positivity moving forward. Don't feel hopeless. We have the power. Thanks, guys.
Judge, I like what he said.
Brendan, you made a lot of points, and you covered a lot of ground as well. First of all, money is much too important with regard to continuing a drug prohibition. It's certainly too important in politics. But I went to a birthday party yesterday for a good friend, and there was a man there who has a tech company. and he has something like 150 employees. He's having trouble finding more employees to come and work for him.
Everybody is, Jim.
You get a work ethic, you learn a skill, you're going to be successful. Don't fall back on this victimization stuff. Oh, poor me. No, it ain't true. You have as many opportunities today as we've ever had before. Roll up your sleeves and hang out with people that are going to be successful, and you're going to be successful as well.
Absolutely. Brendan, thanks. Let's go to Linda in Illinois on the wild card line. Hi, Linda.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I've got two comments to make.
Sure.
Have you heard the commercial that's on the radio where the woman is checking out at the cash register in the store? She got milk and she got eggs, and when the woman at the register told her it was going to be $42, she passed out.
I haven't heard that one yet.
But anyhow, what I was going to tell you was I heard on the news today, I don't know exactly where it's at, if it's Georgia or Alabama, someplace that way. They're going to open the prisons up, and they're going to let them out, murderers and rapists and all.
Well, there's one thing about who to let out, but murders and... Linda, that's not going to happen. That's scaremongering. It is not going to happen. It has not happened. There are a lot of people that are in prison that should not be. I'm not saying that, but they're not going to let the murderers and the rapists out. It's just don't worry about that. And by the way, my wife and I had our natural gas bill triple this month over last month. So I think I'd be pretty much the same thing as that lady in the cash register at the store.
Why is gasoline in California so much higher than some other states?
Because they have so many regulations on it. Plus, they have a big, I think it's a 65 cents a gallon gas tax that goes to the state. We received, George, a check for $500 because of the increased gas prices. They're buying people's votes. Why don't you just reduce the tax on the gasoline instead? But, oh, no, the government wants to be seen as handing out money. It's crazy.
It is crazy times. Let's go to Lucille in Odessa, California. Hey, Lucille, go ahead.
Hello there. I'm impressed with your honor and personality and endeavors. Anyway, I did a hardship bankruptcy 28 years ago on 8/3/1995. In the middle of the case, the Federal Department of Education came in and threatened me that whether I won or not, they would come after me for the rest of my life. And once the judge heard that, they were out of the case. And then...
what were they going to come after you for, Lucille? I'm curious.
They were going to collect regardless of what the judge said. So anyway, then, at the end of the case, because it was a 3-in-1 adversarial bankruptcy, where I had to take on the state of California, the federal government, and a regular bankruptcy all in one. Anyway, at the end, the state came in and told the judge that we didn't need to have court the next day because we had settled out of court. And they hadn't even been talking. They hadn't answered any of the questions.
They lied in court.
Well, yeah, they lied to the court and in writing. Anyway, so then now, 28 years later, mind you, it should have been over 28 years ago, the Department of Education has contacted me trying to change the nature of the whole case and change it from hardship to disability. Now, I did have disabilities in those days, but that's not what I did it on. I did it on hardship. And so they're even playing around with disability dates, it looks like. But
well, it doesn't seem like it's not like a student loan where it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy, Judge.
George, I am really good at two things. Number one, I don't know anything about bankruptcy law, and the other is I don't know anything about tax law. So I'm unable to respond to what I was hearing from Lucille here. But if I hear a horror story concerning a court, it really, really makes me upset. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, But if you lie to a court, there have to be repercussions. And if the court goes off and does things that it shouldn't, we have appeals. Over time that can be taken care of. But if you have a Department of Education threatening you or lying to the court, we've got to have a repercussion to that. I told you I'm in the responsibility business, and it's critically important that I carry out my mandate as a judge. I have two. Number one is to do justice under the facts and the law and the ethics of our profession, very important. Number two is equally important, and that is to have anybody that cares believe justice has been done. And if you're having people listening to Lucille here, they're starting to believe justice is not being done. That's really a bad thing. We have to look into it. We have to look into each one of those allegations and let the cards fall where they may. Tell the truth, tell what happened, and if the Department of Justice did something or the Department of Education did something wrong, there should be repercussions. We have to do that.
When you were a judge, was there anybody in court that you knew was blatantly lying to you?
Yes, and I wouldn't threaten. There was an attorney, and I reported him to the state bar. You don't threaten it. You either do it or you don't do it. And there was one time when I was in on the mental health calendar, and I had two different state agencies that were trying to throw him back and forth because they didn't want to spend the money. I figured out which one was responsible, and I wrote a letter to the governor, and that person lost his job. Accountability business, George. We must do that, and it's up to all of us.
First-time caller.
I hope you follow up and get a good attorney, and if that's happening, there'll be some money in it for the good attorney. Pursue it.
Absolutely. First-time caller Lance is with us in Galloway, New Jersey. Lance, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. A gracious good evening, Judge and George. I have three little questions.
Okay.
Number one, Judge, do you think that altruism is on the endangered species list? Number two, who is watching the watchers? And Lucille's case is a perfect example. And number three, the formula for work that when I taught it as a science teacher was work equals force times distance. But in today's world where there is no work ethic, I believe that if people would discover that the F is fulfillment and the D is discovery, if they discover what gives them fulfillment, they'll go to work every day, and there'll be more people doing the right thing rather than always trying to skate and do the wrong thing. But I truly appreciate your enthusiasm and your efficiency, and above all, your clarity in explaining that there is the positivity around us, and I believe that if people are more accountable and respectful to their own individual responsibility, and that to me is the key, the ability to respond to any challenge. And I think it's forthright and downright accurate.
All right, let's get some of these thoughts. Altruism, of course, being the belief or practice of selfless concern for the well-being of others.
Lance, and thank you for this. And if you're a science teacher, bless you, and you can light all kinds of fires in people and discovery, and that's wonderful. Altruism is still there. There's a lot of bad things happening in this world, Lance, and we get hit with the face with them all the time. But there are a lot of good things happening as well. I mentioned the Red Cross. We have the Orange County Rescue Mission here in our county that takes people off the streets and addresses their real needs. They're made of gold. We have the Doctors Without Borders. We have lots and lots of good things happening as well, and so don't get discouraged. Who watches the watchers? It's up to us all. Right now, countrywide, we seem to be feeling that the FBI and the Department of Justice are getting politicized. Terrible situation. We have to make sure that does not happen, and we have to use the media, find some media people to look into this. But that's always been a problem throughout history, who watches the watchers. But basically it comes down to us. And then as far as your work, and is force versus distance, fulfillment and discovery. And that's what we talked about in our book, The 2030 Kids. We turned the students into investigators, and they would look into this and look into that, and why does this happen and that happen? It's exciting to learn. I mean, that's a secret, but should not be a secret. It's fun to learn. It's fun to discover these various things. And if you are a teacher in science, you're on the vanguard. So good for you, Lance, but don't lose faith. We're still there.
Good. Let's go next to Kathleen in Scranton, Pennsylvania, east of the Rockies. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, George. Hi, Judge. I love it that you just said that. It was like a good rant. And what I want to ask is, what do you think about the prisoners who did nothing but like drugs or, minor misdemeanor crimes, that they learn something while they're there? And I mean like a skill, like workshop. Remember in the old days? I'm 64, so I could tell you, like in the old days, the guys used to have workshop where they learned how to do things on like a bench press, a lathe, and stuff like that.
Are they still doing that, Judge?
Yes, to some degree, but it's much more limited. We shouldn't coddle prisoners, but we certainly should treat them. If you're in a desert area, you should have some air conditioning, and you can grow out of crime, and that's what Kathleen is kind of saying as well. That young men, by the time they turn like 28, are much less likely to be involved with any form of violence or crime. And this is again something, George, that people should focus on. It makes as much sense to me to put that gifted actor Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his heroin problem, and he's had one for a long time. He seems to be doing real well now, but it makes as much sense to me put him in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem.
Former First Lady from many years ago.
Former First Lady married to President Gerald Ford. It's an individual thing. And it's a medical issue. So bring them closer to medical professionals that can help them instead of making them automatic criminals and pushing them farther away. But if Robert Downey Jr., Betty Ford, you or I drive a motor vehicle impaired by, you name it, alcohol, my drug of choice, marijuana, methamphetamines, whatever, that's a crime. Again, focus on this. What's the difference? Now, by my actions, if I'm driving a motor vehicle impaired, I'm putting your safety at risk. But if all I'm doing as an adult is putting my own safety at risk, that's a medical issue, and I should not be in the criminal justice system whatsoever. And we've gotten away from that because there's too much money in the prison guards union and the politicians and the government, et cetera. We've got to get away from that, and thank you for bringing it up, Kathleen.
Let's go to Cornelius in Alexandria, Louisiana. He's a former federal prison guard. Hey, Cornelius.
Hey there, George and Judge.
Hi there.
The key to the judge is right about everything, but when I was in school, I'm 62, we had the prayer, the pledge, the Negro national anthem, and the national anthem, whereas the, white schools had the prayer, the pledge, and the national anthem. Well, once we became integrated, we just had the prayer, the pledge, and the national anthem. But once the Supreme Court took all that stuff out, Judge, and then the devil just stepped right in. So my thing is, Judge, we need biblical principles. I see these young kids, and I know Brandon started us off, but when I got out of prison, because I was a prison guard, the FBI set me up. Y'all pretty much know my story from talking on Coast and everything. And if it wasn't for the inmates, Judge, they helped me out more than the prison, guards and stuff. But the key to it is, you're right about school choice and everything, but we need to turn back to God. But when I got out, I started working at McDonald's. They gave me a second chance to work at McDonald's drive-in, and I was in my 40s, close to 50s then. And what I saw, young folks don't have a work ethic. They used to, but they don't now. And you try to tell them stuff, they don't want to do it. They don't want to pull up their pants. I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. So I think you're right to a certain extent. They don't have a work ethic, and these parents, they're not giving corporal punishment to me too. And in our school system now, they've outlawed corporal punishment. And I think you need to, not beat the child to death, but you need to let them have the fear of God in you as parents. These parents are not telling these children, look, you need to obey what the police officer tells you. Don't fight with the police or anything. And, we were told not to argue with the police, say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and all like that. But these kids now, they disrespect all the old folks and stuff. So we're headed in a wrongward direction, and I hope and pray people will buy your book, Judge. God bless you, Judge and George.
Judge, we're going to come back and let you react to Cornelius. And I am not a fan of beatings in schools of kids by teachers by any means. Suspend a kid or do something, but don't hit him with a ruler. And we'll be back in a moment with Judge Jim Gray and final questions and calls with him. Next hour, Coryelle Kramer joins us. She's an animal communicator, and that's what we're going to talk about on Coast to Coast. Welcome back. Judge Jim Gray with us, George Norrie here with us. Judge, what got you to swing from being a Republican in 1998 to a Libertarian in 2004?
Yes, the passage of the so-called Patriot Act, George, I saw this as a direct frontal attack on our civil liberties, and we just have to maintain our civil liberties, even in times of peril. So I left the Republican Party. It took me about 13 seconds to decide that I really am a libertarian. And you said a few things today, George, about freedom. Be careful. You sound like a libertarian also, because freedom is critically important to our country. It's what has made us great and will continue to do so, but we have to protect it.
It's critical.
I also say, George, I was listening to some of your people talking there about the zoos around the country, and one of the great experiences I've had was in the Colorado Springs Zoo where I fed some giraffes. It was a kick. I recommend it strongly.
Can they really bend their necks that far?
Oh, my goodness, yes, and their tongues are about 1.5 feet long. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, what great animals.
Yeah, they're really amazing animals.
What a planet, huh?
Oh, just incredible.
It's the best.
You go to see the big animals in Africa. It's just an amazing experience. But let me talk a little bit and respond to Cornelius, because he raised some good points.
Sure.
The first one, that the younger generation is going to the dogs, that's been around for time immemorial. From the beginning of time, all people have said that the younger generation is for the birds, and they don't have respect for their elders, and they don't have a work ethic. I have faith in them, but it's the education issue and the responsibility issue that we have to turn around. The second one was that, yes, of course, God is clearly important, but that's an individual thing. I strongly believe in the Constitution, which says that the government shall not sponsor a religion. A separation of church and state is kind of the way people talk about it. It's really important that we stay away from the church being sponsored by government, and are the churches interfering with government or the government interfering with churches. But certainly morality is important. I knew, George, and I bet you felt the same, if I knew full well when I was growing up and in school that if I got into trouble and argued with my teacher, my parents would support the teacher. I just knew that automatically, and I think we've gotten away from that a little bit too.
Sure.
But it all starts with parenting, and school choice is a huge issue.
Do you agree with me, though, that beating a kid is not the thing to do?
I spanked my children probably twice, and they knew I would, so I didn't have to do it again. But I think only a parent should be able to do that. And there's a difference between hitting and paddling or whatever as opposed to spanking. But, no, I don't believe in physical punishment. The old comment that I guess in the Catholic schools and the nuns would hit people over the hand with a ruler. I don't believe in that. I think it's a bad idea.
I think it makes a worse kid. Not a better kid.
It legitimizes violence. If you do this to me and that's okay, then I can do that to, Johnny over here, and because he mouthed off to me.
Exactly.
It doesn't end.
I mean, what has happened, Judge, to serial killers when they were kids? Something horrible happened to these kids.
Frequently. George, I can tell you, talk about sobering. I believe half of the people or so that are incarcerated in our country today grew up in families without fathers. It's a huge thing.
Yeah, that's big.
The epitome of a father will be gentle under his firmness, and the epitome of a mother will be firm under and beneath your gentleness. There's just a difference, and the children must have both experiences growing up. And we've got to, and of course, again, accountability is important. Causing kids to have to earn, I had to make my bed before breakfast or I'd lose 25 cents off my allowance. It's really important to teach responsibility at an early age.
To the phones we go, west of the Rockies. Charles is with us in Sacramento, California. Charles, welcome.
Hi, George. How's our connection?
I'd rather get you on the phone instead of a speaker.
I'm on the phone. You hear me?
A little bit. Just go with your question real fast.
Oh, okay. All right. About education. The kids, they're just wore out. If you think about the word intra and inter and interested, allowing the children to rest. It means they're within rest, intra-rested, and when they're between rest, that's when they're interested and they want to learn. So I'd like to ask about, if His Honor has considered rest in education.
Well, education and thank you for that, Charles. And Sacramento needs all the help it can get, by the way. But education is an individual thing. Again, I think who is in a better position to decide the best education for a child, and that's the child's parents. And can the government do it better? The answer clearly is not. So, and it's an individual thing. What works for some may not work for others. You can go to an arts academy and learn to be a musician. That's not for everybody at all, but the parents should be able to decide that critically important issue. But thank you for the question.
Mike's with us for Sill, California. Michael, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Yes, always love your show, George.
Thank you, Mike.
That's great. You're one of my favorites as far as George's people. You are sort of like, I guess, when I say conservative with some very strong liberal overtones. I wish more people would think like you.
Be careful, Mike. You're getting into all kinds of trouble there. Because anybody that agrees with me is probably going to be controversial. I don't like to talk politics
so much, but
Thank you for
is there some way, because I've grown up in life, to stop the abuses that like they were talking on the news today, having because I think local governments is what should run, government, and federal has its limited use, but have a sort of like a base that, officers can move back and forth when they're abusing people. And I don't mean to say that a lot of officers are abusive. Police forces, I would say, are overall good. But is there some way to, put out a database?
Well, they've got that.
They do. Mike, we need responsibility at all levels of society. The higher the level of position, the more responsibility we should require. And if you're a police officer, you have a badge and a gun, you can command that I do whatever you tell me to do. But we have to know that these people are going to be held responsible for their actions. We've gotten away from that a bit, and I'm sorry to say public employees unions have caused a lot of that. Police unions keep police officers from being fired. Teachers unions keep bad teachers from being fired, that sort of thing. And that's a problem we must address. But we need responsibility, and by God, it's up to all of us, Mike, you, me, and everyone else listening, everyone else in the country. It's our government. If it isn't working, we have no one to blame but ourselves. We have to be more active.
And, Judge, it's unfortunate that the few bad police officers taint the good ones so much.
Well, that's true everywhere, of course. You get one bad judge or one bad prosecutor, and, of course, it taints everyone. That's where leadership comes in, though, George. We have to have a culture of leadership and understanding that if you stray, if you do something for political reasons, or you flirt with some girl that's because you're a police officer and you can do it, you've got to be repercussions for that. We cannot have an atmosphere where those things are condoned and not held accountable.
We've got time for several more calls, so let's go right to them. We go next to Edward in Chicago. Edward, thank you, sir. Go ahead. Eddie, with us? Mr. Chicago has hung up. Let's go to Mike. Well, we just had Mike. Let's go to Guy in Florida. Guy, your turn. You're welcome to the show.
Hello, I am.
Hi.
I just don't know where to begin, but I'm just going to keep it short.
Okay.
I would recommend a guest coming on, Mr. Durham. Do you remember the Durham probe at the end of the Trump era?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Have you ever read the results of that probe?
I have not.
I don't think anybody has. I don't know what ever became of it. I saw an encapsulation of it recently to assure me that it did exist. And what I read was astounding. It was very unnerving, upsetting.
Give us the highlight.
And I recommend it as reading across the country. We paid this guy to do that job. He did that job very well, and he came up with findings that Well, you won't sleep quite as well as you do these days after you read it.
Was it that bad?
It's amazing how this, you talk about two tiers of justice. This is two tiers of justice in great, big black and white.
Do we have two tiers of justice, Judge?
We probably have about 17. You know, it really depends on the individuals. It depends on the presiding judges. It depends on the mayors. It depends on us all. But again, and what Guy is saying, I'm gonna look up that Durham probe and read it again. But you know, again, each individual judge is such a responsible position, and there have to be guidelines, and there have to be held to. And if an attorney feels that a judge is drunk or not listening or whatever, they should do something. They should contact the presiding judge. They should contact the state bar, whatever. We need responsibility at all levels. The higher the position, the more responsibility we should expect.
Dave's with us in Oregon. Welcome to the program. David, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Honor. I was a police officer for many, many years. I was also a school resource officer and a juvenile officer. And what I see on the news today literally appalls me about the officers and what they've done and the kind of stuff that we see out there today. But I do want to say one thing: there are a lot of good officers out there that are currently working and trying to do a hell of a job that is not easy. It wasn't easy when I was doing it, and it's even worse now. It's even harder now.
David, it's a calling. It's a really important position in our society, and you can do more for people. I tell folks, you can do more for somebody as a prosecutor than you can as a defense attorney. You can do a lot as a police officer, and they're in the responsibility business as well. But just like with a medical doctor, an operation is the last resort. And with a police officer, an arrest should be the last resort. We have to do it, of course, but not always, you know. And they are the first line of defense. And you get into affirmative policing, you know, civilian policing, where, you know, you learn the people there. You get a part of the people there. And then they'll come to you when they have a problem. Right now they stay in their police cars and they seem to feel that they have to show how tough they are. That's not what you do. You integrate into society, you're a part of society, and you are a stabling force in society, and we have to stay with that. But you're absolutely correct. Most police officers are fantastic, and they deserve a lot of respect and a lot of support.
Yep, and downgrading the police departments doesn't make any sense to me.
Huge mistake.
Yep, it really is. I mean, the situation in Memphis should not be judged as what happens across the country.
No, and we shouldn't judge Memphis quite yet either. We still don't know the reason for the stop. Originally, they said it was reckless driving or something, but terribly, terribly disturbing. But let's hold off until we get all the facts, George.
Yeah, the video says a lot, though, Jim.
Oh, it does indeed, unless it was manufactured, which I'm sure it was not.
No. Jeremy in North Dakota. Take it away, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Hello, Judge. 19 years, 1 month, and 23 days ago, I was in a near-fatal auto accident. I was driving my Kia Rio up an icy hill. A Ford pickup started to slide down the hill at me. The Ford slid clear across my lane, hit my Kia Rio, head-on to my shoulder. Immediately, I was in a coma for 2.5 months. When I was in my coma, the doctors gave me the best prognosis of a truncated lifespan of 32 and to be a human vegetable the rest of my life. Well, I am far from a human vegetable, and I am 47 years old now. How can a judge call me an incompetent person and take away my constitutional rights and give me a guardian?
Well, they probably thought they were trying to protect you, but how do they do that, Judge?
Well, again, Jeremy, I'm glad you're still with us, and bad things happen in this world, and we just have to make the best of them as best we can. The system is complicated. Life is complicated, and not always do the right things happen. But at least, I guess you ended up with a good doctor, and I was having a little trouble following what the question was, but I'm glad you're with us, and life is complicated.
I guess they declared him incompetent or something like that.
Okay. Well, I don't know. That's a very important prognosis, and it has certain ramifications. And maybe would have been for a while, and then you have to give him another hearing promptly to see if he's progressing. I've been involved in declaring people not able to take care of their own welfare, and so some of them would be involuntarily incarcerated in a mental institution. Real serious stuff. Sometimes it has to happen. Take it very seriously. I'm still friends with the psychiatrist that kept coming in and testifying, and it gave him a great deal of weight. But life is complicated, and I don't know the answer to that.
Judge, we have a minute left. I want to give you the final word.
Okay, let me ask you a question, George.
Sure.
I got this one asked by an attorney. What do you call a cow that's just given birth? And one attorney said that utterly exhausted, which I thought off the top of his head was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Another one said moother, which I thought was pretty good, but mine is better. What do you call a cow that's just given birth? And the answer is decaffeinated.
I love it.
That lowered the level, but at any rate, it's a pleasure to be with you, George. You talk about things directly and no holds barred. And I'm just proud of, and your listeners, they've communicated with me in the past. Numbers of people in prison have communicated. Now I'm in communication with correspondence with about 40 of them. Really important stuff. Keep your chin up. Numbers of prisoners are actually teaching others. They have some skills. They pass it along to their colleagues. They keep their chins up. They encourage them. Human beings need encouragement, and they need optimism. And people that have no optimism, who feel that there's no hope, are the most dangerous people around. So it's a matter of courtesy, a matter of humanity, as a matter of Cornelius's God. We need to treat each other with dignity and respect, all the while holding them accountable. That's what I tried to do in the judicial business. I'm still doing that as a private judge, and life is good.
All right, my friend. Thank you. Judge Jim Gray. Up next, an animal communicator joins us. Up next, Coryelle Kramer back with us, an animal communicator. She'll be talking about animal reincarnation, just an amazing subject, and she's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. We've got a couple fascinating hours for you. Coryelle Kramer back with us, has been connecting and speaking with animals since she was a child. Just like humans, animals have distinct personality types. Coryelle has identified 6 animal dynamics which have redefined and transformed the art of animal communication. Very passionate about showing people how to connect to their animals using her new method of dynamic techniques to take their relationships to an even deeper, more profound level. Coryelle, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, George. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
I was at the airport this weekend, and I saw so many people with dogs that they have as, what do they call it?
Therapy?
Therapy dogs?
Therapy pets.
I mean, they're there wearing a special jacket and stuff like that. The dog is, that is. But it's amazing, the emotional support between the animals.
Yeah, they really do, they help so many people, and especially with what's been going on, there's a lot more people, there's a lot more animals who are coming into play as therapy animals because, we've been going through a lot of fear, a lot of emotional stuff going on, especially in the last few years, with COVID and the lockdown, and then, reintroducing ourselves back into society. There's a lot more therapy animals than there were before, but they're beneficial in incredible ways.
And I can understand, I've had dogs all my life. Haven't had one for a few years because of my travel schedule, but I can understand how people fall in love with their pets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who can't, who can't understand and get love from an animal? I mean, if you're open to it.
It's unconditional, isn't it?
They're just so loving. They have this Christ-like, beautiful, unconditional love consciousness of just constantly giving us love, constantly giving us support if we're open to it.
Coryelle, tell us a little bit more about you and your experience with animals.
So I've been connecting with animals pretty much all my life. I've always been able to hear them. I've always been able to talk to them. And always get a sense for how they're feeling in their bodies because I'm also empathic. So, I've been doing that all my life. I tell people I've been doing it unprofessionally since I was a kid, professionally for, over 2 decades, closer to, 25 years now. So, it's just something that has always been available to me. And it's available to everybody, but it's really and truly about how tuned in you are. It's kind of like a muscle. The more you use your intuitive abilities, the more you use your psychic abilities, the stronger they become. And so I'm using them on a, moment-to-moment basis. So my connection to animals has always been very, very strong. I'm also connected to people, but animals are so open. They're so beautifully just, this, wonderful, loving consciousness that it's much easier for me to connect to them than it is for people sometimes because, sometimes people, we get into our own heads, we get into our emotions and our worries and our concerns, and we get a lot of, monkey mind. So the animals are much more open. They're much more freer to a certain extent.
You're too young, but I'm sure you may not remember the television show Mr. Ed.
Yeah. I've seen videos of Mr. Ed. Those videos, were really, for me, they were really, groundbreaking. That show to me was extremely groundbreaking because even though it kind of was a tongue-in-cheek, made fun of animal communication, kind of, sort of, it basically is the way that it is.
Yeah.
It is the way that it is for me anyway. It's like I hear them exactly like, for example, Mr. Ed. I hear their voice, and through their voice I also get their personalities, which is where the animal dynamics came from.
His owner was Wilbur, and he used to say, "Hello, Wilbur." Yeah. But it was great. Everybody loved it. I remember the theme song and everything else. I'm not gonna sing it for you, but I remember.
You can sing it. It'd be fun. No, but there was also the Shaggy DA. I remember the Shaggy DA. There was, there's spots of where there was.
Remember Lassie, Rin Tin Tin, and those classics? Now that's going way back for you.
I hear about Lassie, and I've heard about Rin Tin Tin. Never saw the shows, though.
But it was funny, though, how television went in streaks with animals as the star of a TV show.
Well, I think it was smart. Animals draw you in. You want to, whether you believe in animal communication or not, it just, to you, you're just, you see a dog, you see a cat, you see a horse, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I want to see that show. Animals are a great way to just draw people in and get them because it touches on the heart. Animals for a lot of people, immediately it's a heart thing. We just feel like this animal is just strong and powerful or beautiful or majestic or just loving, and we want that in our lives, so they draw you in.
And there was a movie of a horse called Flicka, Flicka, I believe that's how it was spelled. Mm-hmm. And that horse was a superstar. I mean, it's
My Friend Flicka, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
I don't know where that came from. It just came out of my head, but whatever. There's something about animals. They touch us on a very deep level. It's not even conscious. It's more subconscious. It's more just heart level. It's like I love that animal. I don't know that animal. It's not my animal maybe, but they draw you in, and they give us this unconditional love and understanding that we just want to be near them because they give us comfort. They give us love, and that's what we want in our lives more than anything, really.
Absolutely. Now, how did you get involved in animal reincarnation?
Interestingly enough, I really didn't know much about reincarnation. I really could put probably about 20 years ago or more I could put it in a thimble about how much I knew about reincarnation. I really did learn everything about this subject because I stayed neutral to my communications with animals, and they were telling me over and over again. The first animal that I ever got was actually, I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but the first animal that I ever really found out about reincarnation from was from a little dog. He was a Chihuahua. And I wasn't expecting anything. The person came to me. I was doing readings at a place in upstate New York, and the woman came to me and she says, "I just want to connect to my beloved animal." And she gave me a picture. I connected to the animal. I had no idea what the heck I was going to get, and all of a sudden, I got that this animal, was reincarnating back to her, and also that the animal had reincarnated to her in a past life. And I started telling her what I was getting, and immediately the woman started crying. And she's like, "I always felt that. I always knew that I knew this soul, this little soul. I it's not a conscious thought. It's not like, oh, my dog is reincarnating. It's a total emotional heart thing." And when I started talking to this Chihuahua, I started getting information from him about the life that he was leading in the past life and the life that he was going to be leading in this new life. And again, like I said, the woman started crying, and immediately I knew that I had something, because when I make people cry, that opens them up on a very emotional level. And she was like, "I felt that he was coming back. I really did. I don't know how to explain it." So that's when I first started understanding what animals were doing and how they were coming back. And it became, in the beginning, very, very few. I would have maybe 2, maybe 3 animals tell me that they were reincarnating back to their people. And it became more and more and more as the years went on. And that's how I really first started getting into the subject of reincarnation with animals.
How soon does the reincarnation process occur? The animal dies on, let's say, a Monday. When's the reincarnation take effect?
What's fascinating to me is that it really depends on what's going on with the person and in their life. Now, there's no guarantee that your beloved animal is going to come back, okay? Some animals are, some animals aren't. It really and truly depends on what's going on in that person and the animal's soul plan or life plan. What's written on their soul. Is this animal coming back? Are you guys going to share more experiences together? But the thing of it is that it really depends on the person and what's going on with them. For example, I lost my heart animal in 2007. I lost my cat, PC. And what happened is that for years, she was telling me, "No, I'm not coming back. No, I'm not coming back." And then stuff started happening in my life where I started to grow as a human being, expand as a human being, expand as an animal communicator. And then I started getting, information from her that she is coming back. And it's only that starting in this year that she's coming back. So there's really no guarantee that your beloved animal is coming back. But what's happening is that as people expand and grow in what I call this shift of consciousness that humanity is going through, as they're growing, as they're expanding as human beings and becoming better human beings, their animals want to experience what humanity is going through and what their person is going through, and they want to be a part of that. So a lot more animals are coming back to their person in this lifetime.
Interesting. Now, how does that person find the animal, or how does the animal find the person?
It's really a beautiful unfolding. There's no cookie cutter. There's no you go here at this point of time and this is what's going to happen and you're going to find each other. Each one is a different kind of story, a different story story for that person and for that animal. But the way they find each other, what I'm discovering is, because I do a lot of work with people where I'll do an animal communication session for them, and first finding out if their animal is coming back. And then the second session I do is, finding out the specifics when it's closer in time to when I was getting when they're coming back. But what people have to understand is that this is kind of like written in stone, so to speak. How your animals are coming back is a story that's unfolding in your life and in their life. So how people find each other how people and how animals find each other, it really depends on what's going on in that situation. Some people can find their animal in a Petco. Again, some people are gifted their animal by a friend. Some people are gifted their animal by, just happenstance, by finding them on, Pet Finders or in an animal rescue or in a shelter. It all really and truly depends on what that animal wants to do and how that animal wants to be found, how that soul, that animal soul, finds that human soul.
What are the possibilities of people replacing the animal once it's passed on? I mean, what's the percent? Do you know?
What I'm finding is, and it really and truly depends on, I'm not connecting to every single person on the planet, but what I'm finding is that when I first started doing the animal communications about 25 years ago professionally, I would have maybe one, maybe two animals a year tell me, hey, I'm coming back to my person. But since the shift of consciousness has really sped up, let's say in the last 15 years, I would probably say the percentage has doubled. So I'm getting anywhere between, 10 to 20 animals a year telling me in animal communications, sessions, yes, I'm coming back to my person, and this is when I'm coming back, and this is how I'm going to look, and this is what the species I'm going to be is, and this is going to be my coloring, and it's grown exponentially because we're going through such an intense time in humanity where we're being forced to, I don't know, the best way I could describe it is we're being pulled to being better people. We're to expand ourselves, to become more spiritual, to become more connected, to become more happier, to become more, balanced. And the animals want to help us to do that. So our beloved animals are what I call our heart animals. The animals that really touch our hearts are coming back because they want to help us. They were such a paramount force in our lives when they were here that they want to help to be a paramount force in our lives as we're expanding and becoming better and more.
If an animal does not reincarnate, why is that?
It's not. The thing that I want to say is if I get that your animal is not coming back, you are not at all doing anything wrong. Okay, you're not a bad person. If you prayed more or you meditated more, it wouldn't change. Like I said before, my heart cat was telling me for decades that I was not coming back. I'm not coming back, Coryelle. I'm not coming back. It wasn't. It's just simply that it's not the right time. It's not written in your soul plan for this or their soul plan for them to come back.
Where are they? In doggy heaven or something?
I like to call it non-physical. You can call it heaven. You could call it nirvana. You can call it whatever. You could call it Harry. I don't care what you call heaven. But it's like non-physical. Their souls are up there. And some people are like, well, animal souls don't go where human souls go. And I was like, well, I don't believe in that. That's not what I found. I found that all the souls go to the same place. I mean, would you really want to go to a heaven without animal souls there? I mean, come on. But when I connect to an animal, I connect to their soul, wherever that is in non-physical, and I find out if they're coming coming back, reincarnating, how they're going to look, what the situation is going to be, meaning how are you guys going to find each other? And I get as much information as I possibly can for that person so that they can feel like they're connected. But again, what I want to say is if your animal's not coming back, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's simply not in your story that you both have together. And that's all there is to it.
Does a reincarnated animal ever come back as a human?
I have had animals come back as humans. However, what I'm dealing with is I'm dealing with more animals coming back as animals. Again,
a dog is a dog, or a dog is a cat?
Well, yeah, a cat, can reincarnate into a dog or a horse or a bird or a turtle. It doesn't matter. But what matters is that soul. Somehow that person knows. There's something about this. Again, this is not a conscious thing where you're saying, oh, yes, this is my animal coming back and this is his soul. It's more on a deeper, you see that animal and you just know. It's in your heart. It's in your gut. It's in your intuition, whatever you want to call it. But you just see this animal and you just know. This is my animal.
They've got those similar traits. We're going to come back and chat more, Coryelle, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, along with Coryelle Kramer. Her website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're talking about animal reincarnation and communications as well. It's fascinating, Coryelle.
Thanks. Yeah, it is a fascinating subject, and it's something that's really and truly, I think, made my work more in depth, and also it's made people's lives happier and animals' lives happier. I mean, if I can connect a person to their beloved animal, that's everything. That's the whole enchilada right there. It's just a beautiful experience. Each one is a beautiful experience.
Do these animals tell you much in terms of their return, what's going on?
They can. What I have found is that when I first connect to an animal, for example, I did a session the other day with two cats of a very long-time client of mine. And what I found was the first session, I just get the specifics. I get, yes, they're coming back, if they're coming back, when they're coming back, around or about date and around or about time of the year. And then what happens is that the second session that I do, because I do a 2-session reincarnation package, the second session is usually closer to the date or the time of year when I'm getting that they're coming back, so I get more specifics. How they're going to look, what bodies they're going to choose. Are they coming back as the same type of species, or are they coming back as a different species? If so, what's that species that they're coming back as? Coloring, how it's going to happen, how it's going to unfold, where they're going to find each other. It gets more specific as it gets closer to the time that I'm getting that they're going to reincarnate and come back into another body.
Now, since you've been doing this, and it's been years, have you ever encountered an animal who tried to trick you for some reason?
No. Animals aren't into tricking and trying to get something over on me. They really are so open and so, honest, and so, they're just incredibly, incredibly truthful. That they don't want to play games. They don't want to try to pull the wool over my eyes. They tell me if they're coming back and when they're coming back, what they're going to look like, how they're going to look, how is the unfolding of the entire thing going to happen. And they want to be truthful. They don't have a lying bone in their body. They really don't.
What are the 6 animal dynamics?
Actually, I've discovered 7.
Oh, really?
Last time, yeah. It's pretty cool. So there are 7 personality archetypes. that I've talked about in my first show that I did with you. And the archetypes are also something about the personality of the animal. So there are the direct and demanding one, which is the guardian. There is the energetic, which is the empath. There is the rule breaker, who's the innovator. There is the shifter, that's the chameleon. That's a little bit of all the dynamics rolled up into one animal. There is the transcendent, which is the Zen master. There's the sensory, which is the pacifist. And then the newest one that I found is the visionary, which is the oracle. So each one has got a different personality to them. Each one has got a plus trait and a minus trait. Each one likes to be touched differently. Each one likes to be talked to differently. Each one likes a different kind of tone of voice. And if you want to know more about them, then you can definitely listen back to the December show that I did with you on the animal dynamics, or you could go to my website. I have videos, I have posts, all different kinds of things, or you can find me on Facebook where I post different traits and plus traits, minus traits, toys that they like, touches that they like on my Facebook page as well.
Does it matter if the animal has died tragically as opposed to naturally, how the reincarnation occurs?
No. Interestingly enough, what I have found is that if an animal had a lot of, let's say, health issues in this life, in the life that they just had, you know, if they had diabetes or they had seizures or they had, skin allergies or food allergies, what I am finding is when the animals are reincarnating back, they're more than likely to be much more healthier. They've let go of all that health issues that were in the past, and in this life they want to come back much more healthier, much more in a balanced physical, mental, emotional state. So they've kind of like, the best way I could describe it is they've kind of like let go of their stuff that they had karmically in their past life, so that they work through that, and now they want to come back in a much more healthier state, so that that their person and them, the animals themselves, don't have to go through that anymore. They've already worked through it, so that they're coming back much more healthier than they were when they left, if there was any health issues at all.
Have you ever had a difficulty connecting with an animal?
I would say not so much for clients. I can pretty much stay neutral, because what the important thing for me is to stay as neutral as I possibly can. When I say neutral, I mean I'm not invested in whatever that animal is answering, or the questions that I'm asking. I'm not invested in their answers. The reason being is I want to stay neutral so that I can hear. I don't want to give false hope to somebody. I don't want to say, yes, your animal is coming back, and then, oh, no, your animal's not coming back, So I try to stay as uninvested in the answers that I'm getting as much as I possibly can. However, for my own animal, when I was connecting with PC, my perfect cat is what I called her, so I called her PC. When I connected with her, I found that it was much harder because I was so invested in what I wanted to hear. So it was hard for me to hear. For years, I would try to get something from her, anything. And for years, I was not getting anything at all. It was almost like I was getting static every single time I connected to her, and I tried to get that answer, are you coming back? I had to really and truly release the want of hearing the answer. And that's when I started to hear the no, I'm not coming back right now. No, I'm not coming back right now. So I tried to stay as neutral as I possibly can, which is difficult, especially when you're very, very connected to the animal.
How do you know you've connected with that specific animal?
It's kind of like when you're talking on the phone with somebody, you know that you're talking on the phone with that person. Like I know right now I'm on the phone with George Norrie. I just get a sense for you. I hear your voice. I get your energy. Yep. I get the your tone of voice and the way your vibration. It's the same way. It's like when I connect to an animal, I know I'm connecting to them because I'm getting their personality, I'm getting their dynamic at the same time, whether they're living or they're in spirit. It doesn't matter. I just know that that connection is clear. What I do really is I connect to that person who I'm talking to, either through Zoom or on the phone, and I use their love for their animal to then connect to that animal. It's kind of like a telephone connection. I don't question that just because right now I'm on a cordless phone, I'm not connected to you, George. I know that I'm connected to you. I don't kind of like question it. I just know it. It's the best way that I can describe it. It's like a strong connection that gives me the certainty that I've reached that animal, that person, and that animal, and the animal that they love.
What % would you say of animals come back?
I would say that the percentage right now is anywhere between 35 to 45%.
That's pretty high.
It is pretty high. Considering that when I first started animal communication, I would get really one. If I was lucky, I was getting one every year. Now I'm getting more and more people connecting to me and asking, is my animal coming back? And I'm getting a yes.
Now, because you're an animal communicator, would it be the same as communicating with the dead, the human?
Absolutely. Just think of it like people have no doubt that, I can connect to somebody who is their person, their grandma, their mother, their father. I get the same, it's the same connection. I'm just I'm using your love for that person to connect to that spirit, no matter if it's, if they're in the hospital or they've already transitioned, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely the same connection. There is no doubt. There is no difference. It's exactly the same as somebody was going to connect to your, beloved person.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You've been doing this for 25 plus years?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Have you noticed anything change?
In what? In the sessions or
with the way the reincarnated animal is reacting?
I think it's become more in depth. What I mean by that is that it feels like it's become more involved. Like it's the animals are really specific in what they're going to look like, how they're going to look. Is it going to be the same type of species? Is it going to be, if they were a tabby cat in this life, are they going to be a tabby cat in the life they're coming back? Are they going to be a horse? Is it going to be the same kind of breed? I think it's become more like each one is their own little story. In the beginning, it used to be, yes, I'm coming back, and that's it. I'm coming back this time, and I'm coming back. I'm coming back, in a month, or I'm coming back in 6 months, or I'm coming back in a year, or something else like that. But now it's become much more involved. Each one is got each animal reincarnation to me seems like it's, like a little story unfolding, where I really get much more detail in what's going to be happening, how they're going to find each other, what's it going to be, what's it going to feel like, and I try to make it as in depth as I possibly can, because a lot of people, when they find out their animal is coming back, the one thing that they're most afraid of is, how is this going to work out? Am I going to find this animal? Is it is it going to be a possibility at all that, am I going to miss this animal? Meaning, are we going to miss each other? So the more information I can get for that person, the better it's going to be.
Do you communicate after the animal is reincarnated or before?
Before. Usually it's before. People
so they pass on, and before they reincarnate, you're in touch with them, basically.
Right. Usually, and it really depends on when this person feels like they want to contact me. I mean, I don't go out looking for reincarnated animals. It's the person.
You don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to contact 25 of them today.
No, not really. I mean, it's really up to the person. And the interesting thing is that a lot of the people who are contacting me, they're like, they tell me the same thing over and over again. I just get this feeling like my animal is coming back. Or they ask me a question like, is my animal coming back? And I say, yeah, I let them know, the fact that you're even asking that question is a strong indication they may be. Because the question wouldn't even be asked if it wasn't even an option.
Once the animal reincarnates, does it know that it used to be the other pet?
Yes.
It does.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what it is that what I try to instill in my clients is this. You have to understand this is not a copycat animal, meaning it's not going to be the same exact animal who reincarnated, back, in 2 years ago, a year ago. You're not the same person that you were even 5 seconds ago. You've changed. You're expanding. You're growing. So this animal, this soul, wherever they are in non-physical, they're expanding, they're growing, they're experiencing different things. So when they come back, I tell people it's kind of like the difference between the 1.0 version to a 2.0 version. So you have to understand this animal is going to be different. Yes, they will have some traits that your other animal had. They want to make sure that you understand it's them. They already know it's them reincarnating, but they want to make sure that their person knows it, and you're only going to know it if they do things that are similar to what they did in the body before. But it's expanded. They're going to be growing. They're going to become better, just like you're becoming a better person on a moment-to-moment basis. Their soul is changing as well.
Under hypnosis, a human can recollect its reincarnated lives, but it cannot if it's not hypnotized. Why is there a difference? Because it seems like these animals know who they were in their past lives. They're not hypnotized, but a human doesn't. We don't have that connection.
We do. It's kind of like a radio. Think of it like an old radio. Whatever frequency, if you're vibrating or you're open to a certain frequency, you're going to get a certain subject come in, and it's going to be, sharp, and it's going to be clear, but only if you're tuned into that kind of frequency. So if you're tuned into reincarnation, if you believe in it, then you're probably going to experience it, and you're not going to have to, be hypnotized. You're going to understand, and you're going to get stuff from your past life, But if you're not tuned into that frequency, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just not your station that you're really jiving with.
Coryelle, let's take phone calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. George Norrie with you. Coryelle Kramer with us. Her website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're going to take your calls this hour. Fascinating work that you do.
Thank you, George. I find it fascinating myself, especially on this subject.
Do you spend time trying to communicate with human souls, too?
I communicate. I say that I talk to anyone. I communicate. I do human psychic work. I do animal psychic work. Whatever. But I feel more comfortable with animals because they're, like I said before, they're so open, they're so free, they're so truthful. I don't have to deal with, the strong emotions that you usually have to deal with human beings.
Are most of the animals that you deal with, have they been domesticated?
Most of the animals that I deal with are domesticated animals. So that would be, everything from horses and goats and pigs to reptiles and to, cats and dogs, of course. But I do work I do work with rescues, wildlife rescues.
Yeah.
So I'll work with some wildlife rescue people, and I've talked to, hawks, and I've talked to wild animals like cougars and bears and all different kinds of animals. It's a different kind of situation, though. When you talk to a wild animal, it's much different than talking to a domesticated animal. It's kind of like the difference between talking to somebody who, in English, when you're talking to somebody in French. It's a different kind of way of communicating totally and completely. When you're talking to a wild animal, they're much more freer. They don't have the connections to humanity like the domesticated animals do.
Do the domesticated animals ever show any kind of animal emotion?
Domesticated animals show a huge range of emotion. They show, I've worked with animals who've had negative emotions such as fear, jealousy, aggression, animals who've had problems with, being, having worry or concern for either themselves, for others, or for their people. So animals have the same range of emotions as humans do. I mean, especially the domesticated ones, because sometimes we can even, when we're going through strong negative emotions like fear and worry and concern or depression, we can start actually affecting our own animals, especially with what was going on, with the lockdown. Our animals were constantly in contact with us, whereas before, a lot of us were going to our work, so they had that kind of like border. They had that, chance to, have, that space. And when we were in lockdown, we were with them 24/7. So a lot of animals were having strong negative emotion because they were feeling what we were feeling.
Let's go to some of the phones, Coryelle, and take them while they come rolling in. Lori's in Tehachapi, California. Welcome to the program. Hi, Lori. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you. I had a question about my dog and getting a puppy, but since you guys are talking about reincarnation, perhaps you can connect with one of my past horses. Just whatever you feel.
Can you connect over the phone, Coryelle?
I can. I can connect over the phone. I can connect through Zoom. I can connect in all different kinds of ways. I usually use a photograph when I connect because it helps to make the connection stronger. Lori, can you give me the name of your horse, please?
Well, there's two. I'm looking at Kelsey, a picture of Kelsey right now, or Doc might come through.
You have two horses that have passed on?
Well, more than that, but these were very...
Oh, my gosh.
Most animals that I've dealt with, horses especially, I've connected with, not as well as I'd like to, but had very special connections with these two.
And what were the two names again?
Doc and Kelsey.
Doc and Kelsey.
Kelsey is coming through stronger than Doc right now. Doc is kind of like standing back and letting Kelsey kind of like take the reins, so to speak. No. But Kelsey was a very, very happy horse. Lovely, lovely light energy. So I'm just doing a quick connection. I'm not really fully and completely connected, but I do want to say that Kelsey had this wonderful, light, happy energy. Like always, like it felt like Kelsey was constantly feeling like her energy was supposed to make others happy. Almost like a therapy horse. You know, you couldn't be unhappy around this being. This being's life purpose was about making others feel good.
It's interesting that you say therapy. Kelsey was very, very cheerful. One of the most cheerful horses that I've ever dealt with, and I've dealt with horses. I was riding before I could walk, and my parents raised horses. Kelsey, I had a spinal cord injury, and Kelsey was trying to lay down for me.
That's beautiful. Really cool.
So she's coming through. I'd like to contact you after the show, but I just wanted to. I had to put her down recently, and I'm having bad feelings that maybe I did it too soon.
I know, and that's normal. A lot of people, especially when they have to euthanize their animal, they have guilt around it. I myself had major guilt around my own heart cat when I had to let her go. That was a very, very emotional situation for me. So I totally and completely get it. And you can certainly find me on my website. It's CoryelleKramer.com.
You take emails that way, Coryelle? You take emails through your website?
You can contact me through the contact page on my website. I'm happy to do sessions with you and with Kelsey and Doc so we can get more in depth. And that's what these reincarnation sessions are really about, is it not only finding out information about your animal coming back, if they're coming back, but also I'm trying to help you heal as much as possible, because the animals don't want us to feel guilty. They don't want us to hate ourselves for putting them down or helping them transition. They're all about love, and they're all about healing.
All right, next up, let's go to Carol in Dearborn, Michigan on the wild card line. Welcome to the program. My old stomping grounds, Carol.
Definitely. Hi. You know, fascinating that you would just talk about guilt. One of my first cats, I had to put down. She had a cancer mass, and I took the vet's advice. I did it. And I wailed with such grief all weekend from the depths of my soul. Well, there was another cat that I saw as I walked out of the vet, and she was so depressed. She was in a cage, all curled up, and I told them I'll take her home. And they said, "Well, you can come back on Monday. If you still want her, you can adopt her." I came back on Monday. I adopted her. I took her home, and. You know, first thing she did was bite me because I reached in, and I scared her. So she was sort of alone, in the room with me just for a little while longer. And she did something. Shayna, the cat I had to put down, used to do something that was just strange. Cats don't do this. She would open the door, and there was a broom behind the door, and she would bite the bristles. This new cat opens the door, bites the bristles on the broom, and I yelled, "Shayna, it's you!" And she never did it again, ever. I've had her for decades, and I just knew in my heart that was Shayna coming back and saying, "I love you. It's okay. It's okay." Just momentarily, a soul entering another soul.
That's it. That's it, Carol. 100%. And there's what I call walk-ins. And the walk-ins are when the animal soul steps back, goes to the back of the bus, so to speak, and then another soul is able to, for a moment or a little bit of time, be able to step in and starts doing stuff that the other animal would never do.
Is that like a human walk-in, Coryelle?
Yeah, it's the same thing, too. I mean, if you've had people who channel other people, like John Edwards, he can channel your grandmother or your father. And what it is that his soul steps out for a second or goes to the back of the bus, and another soul is able to step in, and they act and sound and do the exact same thing that person soul used to do. It's the same thing that happened with Carol and her cat.
Amazing. It truly is. Next to Carol, thank you. Let's go to Elise in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to the program. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Elise.
Hey, George. Was it Corey?
Coryelle, yes.
Coryelle. I have a question. I have a big black cat that I just got about, I don't know. Oh, it was a Christmas gift to myself. So it's been just about a little over a year. And I'm wanting to know what happened to him and if he feels that he needs to continue the oral pain medication or if he's okay without it since I can't really afford a $1,500 hip surgery.
Wow, that's a lot for
That's a lot. But what I would say, a quick answer, and we could certainly do a session where I would go more in depth into it. But what I'm feeling, Elise, is that I would try to look into alternative therapies. Some animals line up with allopathic or Western medicine. Some animals line up with alternative medicine. Some animals line up with both. Your boy feels like he's going to need, alternative therapy. So you might want to look into, for his teeth issues, so you might want to look into things like acupuncture or energy healing like Reiki. You could certainly contact me because I am an energy healer as well. But I think he's going to line up better with the alternative aspect of healing than he would with the allopathic or Western medicine.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good luck.
Well,
Jim in Michigan. Take it away, Jimmy. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going tonight?
Okay, Jim. Thank you.
I believe I have had a dog reincarnate back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of interested if there was any way that she could confirm this. The original dog's name was Tamai, and it was the first dog I ever owned.
What kind of breed was it, Jim?
It was a Black Lab Shepherd mix.
Ah.
And about 4 years ago, I got another dog, and it's considered a huge Black Lab.
Yeah.
But a lot of the mannerisms and just the facial expressions are the same with these two dogs. So I heard the show and I was like, it's something I've been thinking of. Could it be? Yeah. And then the show came on tonight and I was like, oh no, I got to call.
Absolutely. What say you, Coryelle?
Well, I'm glad you did. And here's the thing. You would never consider this question if you didn't somewhere in your heart of hearts know that the answer is yes. Okay, this would never occur to you to ask this question. I mean, I have two cats, and I would never consider asking the question, hey, are you guys PC? Are you my cat reincarnated? Because I know that they're not. So you're simply asking the question is a very, very strong indication that, yes, she is. The other thing is that she's doing exactly what you said. She's doing the mannerisms of the animal that you had before. The facial expressions, the mannerisms, that's, again, a strong indication that, yes, this is an animal that's reincarnated. Because if think about how many mannerisms there are that this animal could do. And the fact that they're doing what your animal used to do, your first beloved animal used to do, is a really, really strong yes indicator to me. So when I connect to your girl now, I'm getting yes, she is the reincarnation of your animal that you had when you your very first dog.
What is it like on the other side for an animal?
This is pretty much the same as it is for people in non-physical. It's kind of like this really beautiful, wonderful place where all these souls commune, get together. Not all of them know each other, of course, because there's billions upon billions of souls. But it could be like so many different kinds of places. There's so many different aspects to non-physical.
I mean, is there a heaven and hell for animals?
See,
You don't believe
some
in
people are going to debate about this, okay? I find that there is no hell. There's kind of like a limbo, what I call a soul rehab, where the soul has to go into this, for want of a better way of saying it, rehab, to work out whatever they were karmically working on when they were here in the physical. And then they can go back to non-physical. They can go back to the light. So animals are so pure of heart. I have not, and this is for me, and again, one animal communicator might get something differently. This is my experience. I haven't really found any animals in rehab. The animals are so pure in their love that they really and truly, their spirit goes straight back to non-physical.
Can you tell by looking in the eyes of an animal if it might be the reincarnated version of the past one?
Yes. The eyes are the windows to the soul. And the soul is the reincarnation. That's the factor. When you look at an animal, when a person looks at an animal and it's their reincarnated animal, the best way I can describe it is you just know. There's no, like, is it? Is it not? Is it? I'm not sure. I think so. Maybe. There's just a 100% yes. This is my animal. I know it. I can't explain why, but I just know that this is my animal.
There are some who are not friendly to animals.
Mm-hmm.
When those animals die, I would guess they aren't going to reincarnate and come back to that person.
No.
They're long gone, right?
No, they're not going to. They needed to work with that person. As crazy as it sounds, it's true. You need to work, just like a human needs to work on their self karmically. So you might have an interesting, what I call an interesting childhood. So that interesting childhood might involve stuff that normally people would say is awful or terrible or just horrible. But you have to work through that in order to become the soul or the person that you're supposed to be.
Coryelle, we're going to come back and take final calls with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Mark Schultz joins us to talk about a scientific study on happiness. I'm looking forward to that. And then later on, Riz Mirza joins us, a psychic medium, to talk about the other side. And welcome back to Coast, our final segment with Coryelle Kramer, George Norrie with you. Coryelle, tell us about the package. You have a package for Reincarnation Animal Entails. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a 2-session package. The first session I go into if the animal is coming back, how they're coming back, and I get a certain kind of time frame. I want to make sure that I check and double-check to make sure that I am getting yes if they're coming back or no if they're not. And again, I want to tell people if the animal is not coming back, they have done nothing wrong. It's not about guilt or not about shame. It's simply what is. Then the second session is usually closer to the date that I was getting the animals coming back or the time of year that I'm getting the animals coming back, so I can get more specifics. When they're coming back, how they're coming back, where the person should look, what the person should do. Is this person in the right frame of mind for the animal to be coming back so they can be open to it? Have they let go of the guilt from the transition? where we're trying to, do some healing work so that I can help that person feel better and release any of those strong negative emotions that could keep the animal from coming back and reincarnating in the time frame that I was getting in the first session. So I'm offering a 2-session package, a special 2-session package. There's a contact form on my website specifically for the reincarnation. And we do a possibility call where that's where I talk to the person and I give them more specifics on what I can do and how I can help them and how I work, and if it seems like we both resonate for one another. And then we can continue working together through the 2-session package that I'm offering now.
Does every animal have a reincarnated story behind it?
Not every single animal, no. They might have a reincarnation story or past life, but not necessarily with that person. It might be that they're having a past life from something that they've had, previously, like years and years and years ago, but it doesn't necessarily have to be with that person. Usually what I'm getting is that it's usually a heart animal that comes back. When I say a heart animal, I mean an animal that has become almost like a soulmate to that person. They touched your heart in a certain way, and that connection is so strong that it sometimes wants to continue in another life in this life.
All right, let's go to final calls. East of the Rockies, Pauline's with us in North Carolina. Hello, Pauline.
Hi. My question is, I had 2 cats. One was Peaches that lived with me inside, and I was heartbroken when I had to put her down. I was really distraught over that. But my question is about this other cat. Her name was, I called her Outside Cat. She was a feral cat, and she lived on my back porch for about 18 years. I built her a little house, and she would come when I called to feed her. And after a couple of years, she let me pick her up, and I was able to pet her and brush her. But then she started to get old, and then one day she was gone. I don't know what happened. I was wondering if you may know, what happened to her.
It feels like, again, the outside cat is, her life was supposed to be outside. If she was meant to come inside, she would have. So any kind of guilt or any kind of questioning about that should be, let go and released. Outside cat feels like what happened with her was something got her, whether it's a dog or a coyote or something else, but it was definitely something bigger than she was. And it happened quickly. And if you want to know more, if you want to get more in depth in that, because we can only go so far on this call, what I would suggest then is contact me through my website. But it feels like it's quick. It was quick. There was not a lot of pain. It was like happy, gone. So if I hope that helps you in some way to heal your heart for Outside Cat.
Does that help a little bit, Pauline?
Yeah, I thought maybe she just went away to die somewhere because she was getting so old now, but that's heartbreaking to know that she went that way.
I know, but it was, again, quick and very little pain. It was something that just got her, and it took her out very, very quickly. So I'm sorry that I couldn't give you something that was more happier for your heart, but just know that she's okay wherever she is.
Coryelle, I've always been told that when an animal runs away, chances are it's running away because it doesn't want to die in front of you. Is that true?
That's sometimes true. There are some animals that need to be on their own when they pass. There are some animals that need us to be not in the general vicinity. That's why some animals transition while we're away on vacation, or we're not at home, we're away at work, because we have a tendency to kind of hold them back through our love. And they want to be able to be released and go back into an easier transition. And if we're holding them back with our love, we can kind of make that harder for them to leave.
That 7th dynamic that you discovered, how did you come across it?
The visionary. The visionary visionary I found because all of the dynamics I found also coincide with the 7 chakras. So the visionary is connected very, very deeply to the 3rd chakra, which is not the 3rd chakra, the 3rd eye. So that's the 6th chakra. So I just basically was connecting again to my work, and this just flowed through me, and it just made sense. And I got all the plus traits and the minus traits. It was just like what I call a download, which is, when I connect to spirit or I connect to the universe, I just get information and it's downloaded into me. And that's what happened. That's how I got the 7 dynamic.
First-time caller Kath is with us in Delaware. Welcome to the show. Hi, Kath.
Hi, George. Good morning.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I feel very, very blessed. It was just a day of synchronicities for me. My dog Sam passed 3 years today. And you've been on the show for the 3rd time. And I asked him if you could help answer my questions, and things have just fallen into place. He was an amazing little dog. He died unexpectedly in 2020. And then the end of that year, I started hearing him say, Mom, Mama, I'm coming home. And this was right during the COVID time.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had an idea that he was coming back. I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And so I started calling around and asking different people who was having, I have allergies, and that's who Sam took care of me as a service dog, and he was for my allergies. So he knew I would have to have a poodle. So I called all these breeders, and it led me to someone in New Jersey. And we went through 3 animal communicators. And you give specifics and around times and what the animal's going to be like. And we were only ever told in the spring you will be 3, and pick the most intelligent dog. We weren't told whether to pick a boy or a girl. Nothing. So we got to this breeder, and there was this little girl sitting on this poor little pup's head. My husband picks her up, and he says, that's it. She's going home with us. Put the collar on her. And that's how we got our Anna. But if Sam was coming back, Anna is totally 100% different. She has migraines. She bites still, and she runs from us. So I know she has issues.
Yeah.
And we've had Reiki done on her, and the vet can't figure it out.
That's usually when I do a lot of my best work, is when the vets are having a hard time figuring out what's going on. So I would definitely say for Anna, we should probably do what I do, which is my weekly session packages. Because I work over time, and she needs time to be able to release whatever is causing these issues, the biting, the allergies, the whole 9 yards. And if we can work over time, then I would suggest doing an animal communication session package. Then for Sam, we can definitely find out when he's coming back through doing a reincarnation package. The thing of it is that every animal communicator is different. Some animal communicators, it depends on how tuned in they are to reincarnation as a subject. I happen to be really tuned into it. So I get a little bit more information than maybe another animal communicator will get. It doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. It's just how tuned in they are to the subject. So definitely contact me. I'm happy to help you try to find Sam as best I possibly can. And I'm happy to help you and your new little puppy, Anna.
Do you sometimes communicate with the animal, Coryelle, not the reincarnated, but the living animal, to ask them what's wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I do a lot of work with animals who are having behavioral issues, unwanted behaviors coming out, going outside the litter box, or, aggression, biting their person, attacking their person. I've done a lot of work with animals through the dynamic, not only animal communication, but through the dynamic work as well. That's probably a huge percentage of the reason why people contact me is unwanted behaviors that the animal's exhibiting.
Let's go to Angel, truck driving in Oregon, west of the Rockies. Angel, go ahead.
George, hi, Corey. You're speaking to my heart, sugar. I've had one soul that she's been with me this life and a past life, and I lost her back in 2018.
I'm sorry.
Like I said, when you said heart connection, I definitely have a heart connection with her. And just let me know, by any chance, do you see maybe her coming back to me in this lifetime? Her name was Nikki.
Am I getting that she's coming back to you? It's not really, really clear right now. The reason being is because I'm not getting a yes or a no. I'm getting a possible. So what I would probably say is that if you sent me her picture through my website, then I can get a clearer idea. And I'm happy to do that for you if I'm getting a yes or no. But right now I'm not getting 100% either yes or no.
Okay, I understand that. I've had another dog that came into my life, I believe, is another soulmate from when I was a child. Now, do people usually have a couple of them come into their lives, maybe?
It depends on what's going on with your soul plan and what's going on with their soul plan. The soul plan is what's going to happen with that soul, whether they're reincarnating, whether you knew them in a past life, things like that there. So, but it's not unusual for an animal to come back several times, or for somebody to have several of heart animals coming back. If you do, you're awful lucky, okay? Because usually we get one or two, one if we're lucky. So if you get more than that, then count your blessings.
Coryelle, we're running out of time. Would you give out your email address to folks?
The email address that you can contact me through is mail, M-A-I-L, at my first name, Coryelle, last name, Kramer.com, or you can just contact me through my website.
Which is probably the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely.
All right, you take care of yourself until next time, okay?
Okay, listen, George, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being back on the show.
Absolutely. We think the world of you. Lots going on this week. Great programs for you, so stick with us on Coast to Coast. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean LaDesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.